Microsoft didn't see search coming, right? IBM didn't see PCs coming. You can go back through the history of technology and you can see time and time again, whoever's got the market locked up right now misses the next big opportunity.
Coming to the Silicon Slopes. We appreciate Nash Foster, CEO, co-founder of Pyrofex, being here this morning. I think you guys might find out that Nash is pretty smart. Give us a rundown of what the company is, when it was started, why it was started, and ultimately why you're in Utah now.
My co-founder, Mike Stay, and I started the company in April of 2016. So we were both educated as mathematicians. We were interested in applying a bunch of the math theory that we had learned over the last 20 years. Got into the blockchain space at the beginning of 2017 when we were approached by the Archain Cooperative to partner with them on building their blockchain platform. We're trying to use our expertise in math, and Mike and I both have extensive backgrounds in cryptography, so trying to use our experience in those areas to build products that help decentralize the world.
What do you mean by decentralize the world?
Well, if you've been paying attention, one of the things you will have noticed about the internet in the last 10 years is that the longer it goes, the fewer companies really control data. What the blockchain promises and what we're really excited about is the ability to just sort of break down those monopolies, right? We want to create technologies that anybody can engage with, right? And so the blockchain's fundamental utility is in the consensus itself. It's in the ability of people to transact with each other reliably, right, with limited risk or with known risks. One of the big things about blockchain that's unique is that it's decentralized, which means that the money is issued by the network and not by a state or a government or a king or a religious authority or anything like that, right? It's issued by the people that operate the network. We're really excited by the promise that it has, not just in social media, not just in search or in computer applications, but when you talk about decentralizing the financial world, all of a sudden it creates the opportunity for people in places that have traditionally had no access to financial services or financial products to get engaged with the rest of the world.
You spent about 5 years at Google?
I did, yeah.
Can you enlighten us to how that was working for one of the best tech companies in the world?
Well, yeah, it was interesting. What I like to tell people is, like, when I started at Google, I reported to a guy who reported to the VP of all of engineering, right? There's 4,000 engineers on the day that I walked in the door, and my skip level was with the guy who everybody rolled up to, right? So if I had problems with the organization, I could go straight to Urs and say, hey, here's what I think. By the time that I left, there were 10 people between me and Urs, right? And so the organization went from being very flat and very collegial, very academic, to being very, very corporate. And it happened very rapidly. And so for me, one of the big takeaways of Google is that you have to really be attentive when if you own or run an organization, you have to be attentive to the way that the organization develops and matures, because you can have a really great decentralized kind of organic culture, and then within just a couple of years it can flip to a sort of calcified corporate thing that can't make any good decisions. It doesn't have any creativity anymore, and it happens overnight. And if you're not paying attention, I think a lot of executives just miss it.
Is this your first time being a founder and an entrepreneur, or have you done it in the past?
I founded 3 of my own companies previously, mostly doing consulting work, and then I was a founding employee at Bruce Schneier's startup Counterpain back in the 90s.
What lessons have you, or are you able to draw from both of those and apply both of them?
The 2 things that constrain startups in general, right, are capital and hiring. Your company is also deeply constrained by the way that you hire, right? The way that you pick people to join your team, the kinds of people that you pick, the attitudes that you look for, and the skills and talents that you're looking for when you do hiring. So the number one thing that I learned from Google was to pay way more attention to hiring than it feels like is reasonable, right? And so way back at the beginning when it was just me and Mike in an office down here in Orem. It was me and Mike in 2,500 square feet. We hired somebody really smart who didn't know anything about hiring at all, and I taught her the process that I wanted to use. In the last 10 months, she's interviewed over 1,000 people, right? We've hired 33, right? So that's the kind of approach that you've got to take if you want to build a corporate culture that's going to work and be sustainable, I think.
Best and worst advice.
I remember the worst advice that I ever got, right? So, and it's from a guy who I deeply respect too, right? He's a 2-time NASDAQ CEO. We played on the same Ultimate Frisbee team together. But the advice that he gave me is to stick to my knitting, right? Like pick one thing and just get great at that. And that I think is terrible advice, especially for startups. You gotta have a lot of irons in the fire. You never really know what's going to be successful. So, we have a bunch of different projects because we think that there are a bunch of different opportunities out there. Oh, this was the best advice I ever got, right? So, okay. A friend of mine, and he told me when I started the company, and I called him and I said, what should I be thinking about as I go to talk to investors? And he said, forget the investors to begin with, focus on the product, because investors want to see you bleed before they're going to put money in your project. And what he meant about that is that it's not enough to just start a company with a good idea and do a little work. You're going to miss your kids' baseball games, you're going to miss dinner, you're going to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure you get to your interview on time. You're going to have to get up in the middle of the night for conference calls with India. There's just a variety of different things that you as a chief executive or as a founder are going to do that normal people would be like, no way. That's not, I got other priorities, man. And so, that was great advice, I thought, and I've really followed it.
Let's open it up for questions.
Yeah, so the question is, what do I see as the future for payments? How do I see blockchain sort of impacting that market? And I'll tell you, I think the payment industry is going to look completely different in 15 years. Visa and MasterCard, Amex, Discover, they rolled out credit card machines to every single vendor everywhere across the United States. And so essentially, between 1980 and 1990, credit cards became completely ubiquitous. But in 1970, nobody had them, right? So that's the process we're about to go through with blockchain. Credit card industry is going to get completely decimated by blockchain because it's just easier. Blockchain is a really easy technology to work with once the software matures. The big problem that we have right now is that until 2017, there wasn't really any money in it, so there weren't any startups that were actually able to work on these projects. All of that has changed, and so we're seeing incredibly rapid evolution, incredibly rapid development of new products. Oh, so the question is, am I worried that Visa and MasterCard will take over the blockchain and make it just another giant corporate thing? And the answer is no. And I think the reason for that is, like I said about Google, right? So organizations that get really large get very slow, right? So one of the beauties of being in a startup, and one of the reasons I keep doing it and I keep coming back to it, and that I love being in small companies so much, is that you have a lot of flexibility and you have a lot of opportunity to move quickly, right? Large corporations, they don't have that. Those guys are going to be way behind by the time that products like ours are ready to hit the market. I'm just not worried. I think they're going to get caught off guard, like a lot of traditional companies get caught off guard. Our IDE is called Pyrofex, and the question is, who else is competing with us in the market? There's a IDE called Remix. It's not very good, to be frank. It was first, so good for them to be first. Pyrofex is the first one that runs on your desktop, that integrates directly with multiple blockchains, not just Ethereum. We have a bunch of features that Remix doesn't have. I actually see Microsoft's Visual Studio as our biggest competitor, and that's the market that we're targeting, is basically all the blockchain developers that would otherwise use Visual Studio or something like that. The question is, given that hiring is a challenge, what are people looking for when they interview with us, and how do we sort of approach finding and retaining the best talent? The reason we were willing to interview 1,000 people to hire 33 is because we think that hiring is always a challenge, right? So the trick is admitting up front that this is the most important thing that your organization is going to do. If we always hire really brilliant people who are incredibly passionate about what they do, then the next guy that shows up who's incredibly brilliant is going to recognize his own kind and be like, this is my place.
What are you going to look back on, and with all of your creations, how will they have impacted the world?
At the end of the day, the number one thing that you hope to look back on and be proud of is your kids, right? So, there's still, my work is important to me, and obviously it's what I came here to talk about, but I've got a beautiful son and a beautiful daughter. And, if I'm sitting there at the end and I'm looking back on anything, I'm hoping they did great.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time this morning, and we look forward to your continued success. And I think we're all a little bit smarter and probably wish we would have paid attention in math class.
Well, thanks for having me.
You bet. Thank you.